Bore da, prynhawn da, neu noswaith da. Well, last week, Beethoven. This week, the man he wanted to have lessons with, but who died too early, Mozart, one of the greatest composers that ever lived. And there's something very interesting about him. He wrote his first piece of music when he was only 4 years old. 4 years old. Right then, let's give it a go and see what we think of it. We could compare it, of course, with last week's as well, see how it compares with that one. And while you're listening to it, what about listening to the different tunes? Quite often you have more than one tune. Do you remember last week I mentioned that pieces are usually made up of parts, and when we were making up music, do you remember we had the exciting bit, we had that twice, and then we had slightly boring bit, and then we had our exciting bit again. Well, Mozart does the same sort of thing. Of course, he doesn't write boring parts, but he has more than one tune. So we will have a little listen to it and then see what you make of it. You can still do the old thing of how it makes you feel, pictures and all that sort of thing, what might happen in your TV programme if this music was there. But you might like to think about instruments as well. And just one little detail for you, because of copyright and things, I didn't like to use a proper recording of this piece, so I've played this into my computer. So when you hear the instruments in this, they're all on my computer. I had to play them all in. I'll hopefully show you a screenshot of the piece playing as we go along. So have a little listen to it and see what you think. So, what did we think? Faster than last week, maybe? Happier? Maybe? Well, what about the actual tune in it and everything? Was it more of a tune than last week? Do you remember last week I talked about the fact that it wasn't much of a tune, was it? It sort of went da-da-da-dum and then it stopped and then it went da-da-da-dum and then it stopped. Whereas this one's got a bit more of a tune to it, hasn't it? Da-da-deen, da-da-deen, da-da-dee-dum, dee-da-dum, dee-da-dum, dee-da-dee-dum. It's got a bit more of a tune to it. And then later on, was there another tune as well? What about that bit that went da da dee diddly dum bum 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 ba da dee doo? What about that bit? That's different, isn't it? And it's got a different feel to it. Those of you who play musical instruments, you might have realised that the first part is in a minor key. It's a sort of a sad key. The piece isn't particularly sad, but it's in that slightly sadder feel to it. whereas the next bit was in a major bit. It was a sort of a slightly happier bit. So let's have another little listen to it, and let's listen out for a few of those things. So remember, you've got your first tune that goes da da dum da da dee da da dee dum da da dee da da dum, and then you've got a bit later on, and it goes quite different, and it's got that la da dee diddly dum bum 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 ba da dum. Excuse the voice. See if you listen out for those and notice them when they come up. Here it is again. Right, so this piece comes from a symphony. And a symphony is a large piece of music written for and played by an orchestra. I'm sure we know what an orchestra is. An orchestra is a group of people, often quite a large group of people, who play instruments together. And this symphony is written by Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, to give him his full title, and it's his 40th. He wrote 41 symphonies, so this one is his 40th symphony. And as you probably know, because these things are chopped up into bits, they're called movements. You have your first movement, your second movement, third movement, and then your fourth movement. So this piece comes from his first movement, the first movement of Mozart's 40th symphony. And what do we know about Mozart, we ask? Well, as I said in the introduction, he wrote his first piece when he was four. So he was a child prodigy. He was really very, very good. He had quite a pushy dad called Leopold, who dragged him around Europe playing in front of all these famous people, all these dukes and emperors and all these other people. So Mozart became very well known at a very young age. He wrote loads and loads and loads of pieces, some of which, of course, he performed himself when he was going around Europe. But some of them, of course, were for instruments that he didn't play. He played a sort of piano, harpsichord type of piano, and he also played the violin. And he was very good at those, obviously. But he wrote lots of things like operas. Do you remember operas where people sing a story? And he wrote lots of concertos. Concertos are a bit like symphonies. They're written for orchestras with lots of bits in them, but they're also written with a solo instrument as well. So you could have a piano concerto, and that's a piece of music for piano and orchestra, and it's chopped up into bits. Or you could have a violin concerto, and that's a piece of music chopped up into bits for violin and orchestra. He also wrote lots of pieces for choirs to sing. He also wrote pieces of music for smaller groups, like, for instance, a string quartet, which has got two violins, a viola, and a cello. But he died when he was quite young. He died when he was 35 years old. And there were all sorts of stories about the idea that maybe another composer called Salieri had poisoned him and all that. But it's not generally thought that that was true. So there we are, Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a child prodigy and an absolute genius. And he was the one, if you remember, that Beethoven wanted to have lessons with all those years ago. So should we give the piece just one more listen? And then after that, I'll see you next week, hopefully with a new piece.